Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for week 2 of our Winter Career Development Academy. For our first session of the day, we are going to be speaking with Lisa Folda, who is a alumni from Bloomberg, but then she also is working with Johns Hopkins. So I'll let her just share a little bit more about herself.
Hi there. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody enjoyed the long weekend. I really love those Zoom photos. You all have done a nice job creating your profiles. If anyone is comfortable being on screen, please feel free. But I'm perfectly happy to interact in the ways that you are most comfortable. So I can do a quick rundown. I'd love to hear a little more. I think one of the important things about working now with a group called the Center for Communication Programs is that I'm always thinking about my audience. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about you all, if we can do that in the chat or whatever way makes sense. So if you all don't mind just putting which program you're in the chat, or you can just say it out loud, whatever you prefer. And then maybe sort of one reason why you are attending the session. What's something that you hope to get out of this? So I'll give you a minute to think about that and tell you a bit more about my background. But that would really, I think, help us make the most of this time together. So just generally, I guess I'm not sure if anything has been shared at all, but I graduated from the MHS program in the Population, Family, and Reproductive Health. And that has been just about almost 20 years ago, not quite. And that was sort of after what I like to refer to as a meandering path. So I don't know what that's been like for you all. I hope it's been an interesting ride, but I feel like there's a lot of ways to come to public health as a profession and as a discipline. And mine was certainly no exception. So I had done several jobs after college, kind of trying to figure out what seemed like a North Star in that. And in each of those things, I found myself volunteering actually with reproductive rights groups. So even though the jobs were not particularly career oriented at the time, there was always this kind of underlying theme. I then applied to and was accepted into the Peace Corps, and that was really formative for me, and wound up doing health education in Madagascar. And it's certainly not for everyone. It's certainly not the only path, but it was a really positive experience for me and shaped a lot of what happened next. So when I got back, I was interested in a lot of things, but health was high on that list. Can everybody access the raise hand function or just kind of a reaction? Can I get a thumbs up from the group if that is something you're versed in? Thank you, Erin. Thanks. Okay, maybe not, maybe, oh, thank you, Zabe. Great. Yeah, thanks for adding that too. So I think this may date me a little bit, but when I was considering a career path, I didn't really know that public health was a thing. It just was not, it wasn't something that was high profile when I was in school. There were a lot of other things that seemed more obvious, I guess, doctors, lawyers, et cetera, as professions. So to have done this health education experience and then realize that there was a huge network of people doing this thing called public health was just a revelation. And so it was really an exciting thing to know that there was more training I could get to continue to pursue and be part of that. So I wound up at Hopkins in the MHS program, and that is, at the time, was not unlike the MSPH program is now. I think that may have changed a little bit. So there was that very critical kind of hands-on piece of doing a practicum and essentially, 6 months of on-the-job training. So I wound up doing that at the Center for Communication Programs because I took a key course and I wound up getting to know the faculty member and eventually TAing for her. So that became my practicum and I was hired on after graduation. So I think maybe I'll stop there, Olivia. Is that a sort of enough background to start? There's other episodes between then and now, but maybe that's enough to get us started. And I really want to encourage all of you, say thanks again for joining. And I see Jeanette Jeffrey, who I think I have met before. Thanks for joining, and please, by all means, put any questions in the chat. We'll do our best to make it helpful to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Lisa. It actually takes us to our first question. So you've touched on this a little bit, but if you want to go in a little bit more detail just about how, your experiences at CCP have been. I know you shared coming out of getting your degree program, you ended up working there. So what exactly did that look like for you making that transition?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I don't know how many opportunities there are like this at the school, but there are a number of what I would call kind of critical classes, things that really are trying to give you this sense of, if you chose X, this is what it would be like in the working world. And for me, that was a class called Health Communication Programs. It was then taught by Phyllis Pietro, who was the founder of CCP, but then taught by someone named Doug Story for many years. And it's being taught again, starting in third and fourth term by Dr. Radha Rajan and Carmen Cronin. And I will be helping out with that, which is such a fun way to stay connected to that, just as a door opener, a way for people to know about the discipline and the work. So when I first started it, the class is really kind of a how-to guide. There's a lot about behavior change theory. There is a lot about what does it mean to develop a strategy? What does it mean to find your audience, to find your problem behavior? What are your opportunities for creating behavior change? And so when I started at CCP, I had those sort of building blocks. You actually do implement a campaign, a very small one, during the course from start to finish. And so it's kind of a matter of, taking these basic steps and then saying, well, we are actually going to do this on a national level for, CHAD around polio, or whatever the content area is. So it is quite different. Obviously, that is a huge scale, much different stakeholders. So it does take some flexibility to be able to consider those same concepts, but know that they remain relevant and applicable. But that really, I think the course does a fantastic job of kind of saying, these are the skills. This is the basic foundation of how these things are developed in a way that is in our assessment and has been evaluated to be responsible and effective. So again, when I first started, I was sort of low person on the totem pole, and that meant doing some administrative work, certainly. And one insight that I would share, because I do think it can be hard to get started. Everyone is eager to be embedded in the most meaningful pieces of the work. And a lot of us, you do have to, in most cases, you have to pay some dues. There is, less glamorous elements that have to get done. I will say, in taking notes at high level meetings, it's not a glamorous position, but it got me in the room with a lot of really interesting people. And it really helped me hear about kind of the higher level conversations. Who are the players? How do they negotiate? There was a lot to observe and learn from there. So even if the role and the task are potentially not so glamorous or not what you saw yourself doing, I think there's a lot of ways to reframe that and think about the environment that you're in and what you can gain from it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for highlighting that. There are two pieces there that I feel are really important. When you think about the transition and really leveraging the things that you're doing in the classroom. So like you shared a campaign for some students who may be working on their capstone, or even like the practicum opportunity is like, these are actual ways in which you're developing skill sets. And you're just going to build on it, right? As you graduate and you go to practice and are doing more. So it's really those foundational elements, but then also kind of considering that maybe you may not be in your ideal role right out of graduation, right? It may be a stepping stone opportunity but it's a way to get connected, to build your network, to learn more about the industry or what have you. So thank you for that. I think those are two beautiful takeaways.
I'm gonna provide one more anecdote, Olivia, that's kind of the other end of the spectrum from
Mhm.
those early years, which was there was a very small project that kind of nobody had time for. Just the scale on which CCP works is so often pretty high level, but we had won a small project with not a lot of funding from a new donor, a smaller donor. And so that essentially got handed to me for total ownership. And, that was a real opportunity. I mean, that was sort of just right place, right time, and having built some trust with my supervisor and knowing that, there were certainly stakes. There was people's health and well-being on the line, but it was, there was enough interaction with my supervisor, a small tight team in Nigeria where the project was based, that it really was possible for me to be heavily engaged in that and not feel like it was too overwhelming. So that was also an equally valuable transition. It was like, oh, I've done this school campaign, now I get this small, like, real world
Mhm.
campaign. And that again was such a boon in trying to continue to build scope and skills on a much bigger scale.
Yeah, that's really good because I think sometimes there may be a concern about having to or needing to have, all of the skill sets or the experiences right away when you graduate. And so I think that really speaks to the opportunities that you may get at an organization to be able to either develop those skills or improve them or really kind of just show, that you are able to perform at a certain level.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay, so our next question is, what do you like most about working in global health?
Yeah, and just to the students gathered, Olivia did give me some previews, and I have to say this one was cause for a lot of reflection. I mean, it would be so cliched to say the global piece. It's such an amazing adventure and a gift to be working in global health. Um, there is a lot of room right now for asking hard questions about our role in travel and our the expertise that particularly white Westerners are bringing to these projects. So I will definitely admit to kind of trying to hold up the mirror and ask those hard questions. Do I really need to go? Am I the right person for this task? But I cannot deny that it is so energizing, and just to be in a context where good work is happening. Our teams in countries of implementation are so grounded, so connected to these pieces that when it can feel kind of abstract and virtual, like to go there and be there is such an essential part of really understanding the work. In terms of kind of a piece of it that I really enjoy, surprisingly for me, it's been grant writing. There is a lot of pressure around that piece of the work, but I also find it to be one of the most creative and fertile times. And so, even just to say there is this need, there is this question that's been identified, how do you and your organization propose to approach that, has yielded some of the most interesting conversations I've had, some of the best kind of partnership and collaborative times. So that I just wanted to mention that as sort of a practical piece of what winds up happening for, as far as I know, all of us. There's so much of this that is under grant funding that I find that to be a really dynamic and interesting part of the process.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. I think grant writing may not necessarily be in the forefront of everyone's mind, but it's a great point to bring up because that in and of itself is a skill set.
Right.
Learning how to do that and be able to write it in a way in which that you can secure that funding. Okay, so how would you say your academic training from Bloomberg prepared you? Now, you did share about this a little bit in your introduction and how you made the transition to CCP. Is there anything that you want to add to that from your experience, even if it's like connections with faculty or whatever that may be?
Yeah, I think the soundbite that really occurs to me is just collaboration. It really was a time where I was faced in a new way. So I mean, Peace Corps can feel very isolating in some ways, but it also forces to be effective. It has to be collaborative. I mean, you have to work in your community and make sure that neighbors, counterparts are driving the agenda there. And so during my time at Bloomberg, I feel like that was also put into high relief. Like nothing happens in a vacuum. No person can do public health alone.
Yeah.
And it really became an essential and invigorating conversation about what makes up a good team. Hard data analysis was not my forte, and it was really important to know that I had a collaborator with that skill set when we were faced with a certain kind of project or a certain kind of agenda. There's so many group projects. I'm sure all of you are in the thick of this in some ways. And so there's a lot that comes down to, negotiation, identifying good partners, really elevating others and knowing what each person's strengths are, that has played out in all kinds of ways that you don't necessarily label as public health and would be relevant in all sorts of other disciplines. But for our work to be effective, it is absolutely critical.
So if I can ask, just as a follow-up, when it comes to collaboration, being a student, of course, there are the team projects that will bring folks together, but are there any recommendations that you have about how, students can kind of step outside of themselves to pursue that collaboration or just connect to others?
Can you say more about what you mean about step outside of themselves? What you
Sure.
mean?
So I know sometimes just like reaching out to someone that may be within the industry or reaching out to a faculty person can seem intimidating. So as far as like making those connections, are there recommendations that you have about how they should go about it or just doing it in general?
So I'm hopeful that each of you has a good advisor in some form. It may not be an academic advice, as someone specifically assigned to you in your department. There are things that are more organic than that. It may just be someone whose class you took that you really enjoyed. So I would certainly encourage you to capitalize on that in whatever way you can. Either office hours or just saying to them, I have a stronger interest in this thing than I originally thought, and can I talk to you more about it? I would really encourage each of you to be comfortable with an informal mentor as well as kind of assigned those folks in authority that are assigned to you. There are certainly ways to do that through student organizations, even just learning about student groups that are happening that are in disciplines other than your own. Taking the school is such an incredible kind of stew pot of all these different disciplines. Some folks work on issues that are only in the US, some are working on global, some are working on policy, some are working on data analysis. Just even finding out how to get yourself in front of something different can also tell you, what are the kinds of things that if I'm in my lane as the population reproductive health expert, what interesting things are happening in epi or are happening in these other departmental health that I might want to pull in. So that broad awareness of the school environment can be really useful. That too can seem like a lot. I know your programs are demanding and a lot is expected of you. But your time there is limited, and I would really encourage you to take chances that are not consequential, so to speak, in terms of your academic record. Make sure that you're just going to see speakers and sitting in on things that are happening, because it's such a rich place to do that. It'll be hard to replicate after you leave here.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think just the idea that there is a lot to be learned from being at Bloomberg, both inside and outside of the classroom, is something really important for students to kind of sit with, because there are a lot of opportunities there and many different ways to connect. Okay, so the next question, how has your work in not public health, global health changed over the years? I guess that is also public health.
So yeah, that's a good one. And it has had three very distinct chapters. So I think I mentioned when I first started at CCP, I was actually doing project management and a lot of the strategy and campaign design. And I sort of had to take a closer look at what that meant in the longer term, which, might include moving abroad for a period of time. It might include continuing to be on multiple projects but based in the US. There were sort of, I'd been there about 4 years, and there were some kind of lifestyle choices that were becoming apparent. My work portfolio included several different projects, and I was traveling a lot. And that was amazing, as I mentioned, and also at the time that I was trying to start a family and make different choices in my personal life, I really had to say, this is making me feel disconnected from things I'd like to be involved in Baltimore, since I plan to be a permanent resident here, and just really, do some self-reflection about what I wanted in the bigger picture. So I want, and conveniently, CCP also lost one of our large global bids. So I knew that there was a chance that some staffing would be reduced anyway. So it seemed like a good time for me to consider what else I might explore. And I actually wound up being part of the public health studies program at the undergrad campus. So working with undergraduates who were majoring in public health. Again, for those of you who joined at the start of this session, I didn't even know what public health was when I was in college, and now it is the largest major at the Hopkins undergrad campus. It's just an incredible program and group of people, and there are many Bloomberg faculty who teach for it. So I wound up as an advisor and instructor and faculty member for the undergrad program, which included setting up a study abroad program in South Africa. And that was really, they hadn't had anything like that. It was part of, as I was thinking about, am I leaving global health for good? This is such a different environment. I thought, maybe this is something I can bring to enrich student learning. So that was a really important piece for me that they agreed to and supported me in establishing that. Again, quite different. But the great wonder of that time, I realized, is that I learned so much from the students. I had my sort of specific expertise, and I was assigned to work with students of many stripes, with many interests. So, folks coming in who were like, I'm really interested in mental health policy. And I thought, I have zero background in that, and we are going to, go this road together. And, but I had enough contacts at the School of Public Health, even just from my time as a student there and at CCP, that, I was able to at least help them get started, make connections, find internships. And I did. I learned so much along the way. So, that was a good 10 years, and it was fantastic. And it was what my family needed at the time. And then other things that, other upheaval happens in the world. And I felt myself sort of itching to be back, getting my quote unquote, getting my hands dirty in public health, rather than focusing on mentoring the next generation. And so, in fact, I took a job briefly at a different group with the School of Medicine. And that was a real learning experience. And I know that Olivia has a question for me about what might have seemed a mistake at the time that has in fact been a win ultimately. And I would say that 6 months was it. I left the undergrad program. I wound up taking a job with a group that I didn't know much about, but I knew I could do the job based on the job description. Interviews went well, but it really was just too much of a deep dive into a content area that was unfamiliar. Despite my generalist knowledge, it was a very bumpy transition, and ultimately just didn't seem like the right fit, despite our efforts to make it work. So ultimately I feel really grateful for that, because that sort of helped me get ready for then returning again to CCP, in fact, but in a different role. So I now have a more of an operations role. I have a lot more responsibility for developing systems that help run the center as a whole, but particularly the research and evaluation unit. And that interim 6 months was really the thing that, helped me find my stride in what you might describe as a, a transition to being part of operations and systems. So I think that answers the question, but yes, I'm now back with CCP. My travel schedule is certainly diminished, but there is some, and I have my hand in many projects instead of, just the few of an individual portfolio. So a lot of it really is about relationships and liaising with different groups to make sure that we are, putting our best foot forward and making sure CCP can run in its, be its best self, so to speak.
Yeah, that definitely answers the question. And I think it just goes to show that with not just global health, but public health in general, that you can make those pivots and make those changes and kind of do some discovery. But not only that, that you don't necessarily have to leave public health just because you are making a pivot or a change, because it is very broad.
Absolutely. And Olivia, the one piece that one of my mentors said to me that I keep returning to is there's just some element of serendipity. There is that. I mean, he had a great example of literally getting a job sitting next to someone on a plane. Like that was how the contact was established.
Oh, wow.
So, I can't tell you how to do that, but I guess what I would encourage each of you to think about is just, how to stay open to it. How can you bring interesting conversations and people into your lives, and things sometimes are not what we might predict. It will always be a variable.
Absolutely. As you were saying that, I was actually thinking about the idea of openness, of just being open to conversations and not knowing where they're going to lead. I actually recently had the experience of meeting someone at a conference in Boston who actually lives around the corner from me.
Nice,
And it's
exactly.
crazy that it's like, okay, we flew to a completely different state, didn't even know each other, but we live
Yeah,
within a mile of each other. So it really is just that openness, having conversations with people, because you never know where it could lead.
absolutely.
Um, so kind of segueing into the next question, when I think about experiences, I do think about having those conversations, those connections. But what would you say has been more valuable for you, your education or your experience?
So this seems like a totally loaded question because both are so important. I mean, having at this stage of my career, I would have to say experience, because my master's was 2 years and the career has been more than 20.
Mm.
And it's just been, as an aggregate, it is the thing that continues to propel me into other new and interesting circumstances. So, that said, I can certainly remember being in the Peace Corps, being, thrown in the deep end, not even knowing what an indicator was. There were various fundamental pieces, and there were a few people in my training group who were there as part of their master's program. And I mean, they were just head and shoulders above the rest of us. They were so ready for the work and the tasks and the opportunities. And I remember thinking, like, what is that secret sauce? How do I get some of that? So the education was essential. It taught me a language I didn't know yet. It gave me the skills I needed to ask the right questions. And that, there's no denying that I couldn't have succeeded without it. And, now there's more that's happening in public health at the undergrad level, but that was not the background that I had. So it was really an essential piece. Since then, however, I do think that a lot just relies on continuing to build networks, continuing to make sure that you are taking advantage of ongoing learning. One thing that is remarkable, and I would encourage you all to be very mindful of as you consider jobs and post-graduation opportunities, is what are the opportunities for ongoing learning. It's something that Hopkins does exceptionally well. There are so many ways that you can audit a class or do something with LinkedIn Learning, or all of the things that, our own internal systems are putting out there as learning opportunities, certificates at the business school, things through HR, really specific skill sets. So if you're going somewhere that has kind of a big salary and high expectations, but is not prepared to support you as you need to adapt and grow, I'd be very, ask a lot of good questions about that. You need to make sure that, it's such a huge and dynamic field. In order to keep up, you need to know how they're going to provide that for you, so that, when the next platform emerges, or when the next big question about artificial intelligence or whatever it is that is relating to your work, how is your employer going to give you the credentials or the certification that you need to stay up on those areas.
Absolutely. I know the question here is really kind of focusing on academia's education, but the point you bring up is essential, that there is this piece of it of being a lifelong learner, and seeking out those opportunities, and the fact that education can come through your experiences. So thank you for bringing that up. So what skills do you believe that you developed early on in your career that you're still using today, or maybe even that you've improved upon?
I mean, in terms of sort of strictly academic training, I think I would say writing. I think that is one that is worth putting the time in. Make sure that you find someone who's willing to give you good feedback. Make sure to pay attention to that feedback. It is never not going to be in demand. There's so many ways that it can be applied, grant writing, communications, reports on, your amazing discoveries. There's even whole areas that are basically, take this incredibly scientific experiment and lab report and put it into a language that anyone can understand. That is an amazing and important skill set. So do think about, the ways that you can strengthen your communications, particularly in writing. And I think I would say getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. I don't know that is often put on a syllabus as a learning objective, but I think it's one of the most important things you can practice, is to continue to put yourself in situations where you are not the expert or the knower, and you continue to let your curiosity guide you. I think in global health that has a particular relevance. There are a lot of ways where you may feel like an outsider. We can't all be citizens of every country that we're hoping to collaborate with. And so, some of that is just the ability to build relationships and rapport, to kind of know when humility is appropriate and when confidence is, or when confidence is more relevant. But there will never be a time that, no matter where in your career, there will never come a time where you're always comfortable. So figure out what you need to do to take care of yourself, and, be adaptable. And that certainly, was happening a lot early in my career, and that is something that I really, continue to need to draw on.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's okay to not know everything. And I think that also kind of ties back to the idea of openness. When you are open to the idea that you may not necessarily know how to navigate every situation right away, it allows you to open yourself up to learning, right? And I think through those uncomfortable experiences, you do learn more. You learn more about yourself, and you're learning more about others as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the last question that I have prepared for you before we open the floor to the students really is just if there's any advice, recommendations that you can give to the students, as they make a transition into global health, but also just in general. There's students who are going to be graduating in May. Anything that you can share with them that will help support their transition?
Yeah, there's so many. When I was trying to sort of winnow this one down, I kept coming back to the money. I think you can know a lot about where global health is going by studying the donors. And that is not something that happened for me during school. That was entirely the product of some time at CCP. So, certainly there will be an on-the-job possibility for you for that. But the more you can think about, what are the issues that you care about? What are the things that you would like to get involved in, and figure out who's paying for it? I think that would be a real asset in your pursuits. It will tell you what they care about, which is ultimately what's going to, provide those opportunities. It will help you understand that, there are different priorities out there being implemented. And so maybe you want to work more for some, for the Gates Foundation instead of USAID, or, maybe there's a donor from Norway that has a particular interest in climate change, or whatever, whatever the thing is. Be sure to look at the source of the funding. With that in mind, I would also encourage you to really do some reflection and reading on decolonization. It's an incredibly complex topic, obviously, and we have a long way to go, but there are reasons that people, use different words and are trying to, adjust their language, think more about what is a representative and collaborative team, who really needs to be guiding some of these priorities and agendas. And so even, as much as the donors are working hard to do that, there is, work you can do for yourself, just to understand those issues and how they might be, have influence over, the trajectory of the field.
Thank you for that. I think that's a really good point to bring up, because it's something that many students may not know or even consider, just about considering who the donors are and how that really speaks to the direction things are going, and if that's the right fit for you. So with that, I just want to open up the chat to anyone. If you have any questions, also, if you want to just come off mute, feel free to use the raise your hand function, and then you can ask any questions that you have for Lisa.
While y'all are thinking about that, I'm going to give you one more piece of advice that one of my favorite mentors gave to me, which was, if you want to live in Baltimore after school, don't take a job in Rockville. And it was a hilarious moment where I thought, I don't even know what jobs there are in Rockville, but she was basically making the point of, don't take on something that's going to kill your soul in the commute or whatever. Think about your lifestyle as well as your ambition, because it will become something that could be long-term, and you deserve to keep all of the variables in mind, and not just necessarily the career ladder.
Absolutely. So we have a question that has come through. It says, hello, how important is the MPH certificate in job applications? For example, if I have an adolescent health certificate during the MPH, but later want to go into women's health, how can I pivot and show interest? Paul, so you wanted to answer this question?
No, I was just checking it off. You're good.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Lisa.
No, I think it's a great question. I think that's one where, that becomes the tension between education and experience. And so, that certificate can be a great thing to get your foot in the door on something with adolescent health. And also, so much of the learning process is, what do I not like? Every bad manager you ever have, you should make a list of what, the things that are not working for you, so that you can grow into being a different manager to someone else. So, don't neglect those lessons of what you might not want to do. So if you wind up in something that you thought was, your public health purpose, and it turns out not to be, I wouldn't say that having the certificate is a consequence. I think it's an opportunity. So, number one is, we know that you tailor your resume to every opportunity. So on the things in women's health, you just don't need to mention that. If they turn that up, great. But more compelling would be a strong cover letter that talks about your interest in women's health, and how, in your work with adolescents, you really developed this deeper understanding of what that might mean for, women of a certain age, or mothers, or, that became soundboard, a reflection point for you to say, actually, I think this is a more important purpose and role for me. And these skills are transferable. You know, I haven't done something specific to this age group, but, you know, my data analysis, my, you know, ability to build coalitions, all of those things transfer. And I'm eager for the opportunity to, you know, to support that as a new mission.
Absolutely. Definitely agree with just how you are articulating your experiences and kind of framing that for whatever the position is that you're applying to. Any other questions? Again, if you want to ask your question off of mute, just go ahead and raise your hand and you can do that.
Lisa, it's Jeanette Jeffrey, and I just wanted
Hi.
to say hi to you again. And for everyone that's out there, Lisa, I've kept in touch with her since I graduated in 2008. And even though I would touch in every now and then, mostly through LinkedIn and messaging, those were really valuable interactions. And so again, I would really stress of trying to maintain your networks, and even just a little encouragement, or there was a job that I was looking to apply to that Lisa had worked in past, and she was able to give me insight. And so again, maintaining the relationships that you're forming right now at the school, I think are essential. And you never know when just a conversation 5 years down the road that's no more than a paragraph could, you know, really change the way in which you navigate to another position. So I just wanted to say thank you, and it's great to see you. And as someone who lived in Baltimore and worked in Rockville, I couldn't agree more. An hour and a half commute.
I'm so
one
sorry.
way was grueling.
That's a
So
lot.
I did change that up. So thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, great to see you, Jeanette.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I want to voice too that my general discomfort with the title of this session. I mean, as someone who works in public health, it is hard to call yourself an expert if you know anything about the field. Certainly there are areas where we can, you know, bring expertise, but there's just so many amazing, wonderful people doing this. You know, I really want to make sure that anybody here, you know, takes with a grain of salt that mine is just one voice, and I would, you know, encourage you to continue to seek out many others.
Absolutely. Thank you both. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I just want to thank you so much, Lisa, for your time today. There are definitely things that I learned, and so I hope that this was a beneficial session for you all as students. Of course, this will be available to you as far as the recording in the event lobby. And then we do actually have a few more sessions that are going to be coming up later in today. So please do join us for these sessions, the next 3, where we will be speaking with other alumni as well. Again, Lisa, thank you again so much for all of your valuable feedback and for sharing your time with us today.
It's such a pleasure. Yeah, if you all think of other things, and I know Olivia's got my email, and you're certainly welcome to be in touch. You know, while you're in this moment of decision and options, you know, get clear on your own values. What are the things that you want to guide? Because the world moves at such a fast and furious pace that you will always be asked to prioritize, you know, to winnow, to triage. So make sure that you know what's important to you, so that it's easier for you to make those choices when the forks come, because they will. But you're in such a great starting point. I mean, the school is tremendous. The resources available to you are so many. And, you know, big thanks to Olivia and Paul for putting out programming like this that hopefully is helpful to you as you navigate next steps.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully we'll see you at the next session. Bye now.
Thanks all.